Hey, welcome back to Time with Steel Garage. I'm Jimmy. If this is your first time here, welcome. Do me a favor though, hit subscribe, like, comment, share with your friends. We appreciate you. And if you're a returning fan, if you will, thank you. I got a whole lot of stuff to catch you up on. First of all, what a great day. What a great day. I just found out I'm an uncle and I feel like I had another kid. I'm so excited about it. Healthy baby. She's doing great, and now Ember's got another cousin, so very excited about that. Also, just got back from a family Disney vacation, and I know what you're thinking, dads, right? You don't just go to Disney, you survive Disney. I survived. 4 days is about my limit. I only got upset a couple of times, but in all seriousness though, it was so cool to see Disney through my daughter's eyes. She was so excited. Although I did realize kids regenerate after sleep and adults don't. Because about day 4, the wife and I were looking a little rough, you know what I'm saying? But what else? Oh, I had a surprise interview while I was on vacation, one that I've been trying to get for a year, and my family all pulled together to help me make it happen. I had to drive to get a suit as I was leaving Disney Park at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We made it happen, and I'm happy to say I got that job, so I'm pretty excited. It's been a great family vacation. It's been a great couple of weeks, but I brought you here to talk about the 2JZ Merc, because I've been busting my butt over this car the last couple of weeks and I haven't really documented any of it. So we got to get you up to speed so that we can continue on. You know what I'm saying? For those of you that are new here, this is my 1988 Mercedes 300E. It was given to me by one of my best friends. I did a lot of work to it, daily drove it for like a year, and then decided it was, the motor was tired. It was time to get her up to speed. And I just decided I was going to 2JZ swap it. So I know that angers a lot of Mercedes fans, and I'm sorry, you're just going to have to get over it. But it was like this car was designed from a factory to put a 2J in. Probably far the easiest motor swap I've ever done. But we've got a 2JZ here that started life as an IS300 VVTi non-turbo motor. I rebuilt the motor, I put forged rods in, stock GT pistons, GT head gasket. Use stock Toyota parts wherever possible, and we put a treadstone manifold on them. We got a precision turbo. We've got Oside Tiger 440 injectors. You've got an IS300 lower intake, a Rad Industries conversion plate, and a stock GTE upper intake. We're using an Aristo 2JZ VVTi motor ECU. Those engines are only available in Japan, so we're using the Japanese ECU. We're also using the Japanese automatic, the AE340LE, or the A340 for short. There's a couple different versions of that A340 out there, but this one came from an Aristo. And we went through the valve body, put a shift kit in it, and I've made it so that I can manually shift the transmission as well as allow the ECU to control it. We've got a full custom drive shaft in here, and we've eliminated the Guibo discs. The only stock piece of the drivetrain left is the Mercedes rear diff, which I give about 90 days, maybe less, maybe the first burnout before it destroys itself. But I'm going to tackle that problem in a future date when I blow it up, and I'm going to put a nice rear end in it, so to speak. But we're at the point in the build where we're starting to get to a lot of little puzzles to solve here and there. I've got most of the systems online, but I'm going to explain that to you here in the video. All right, we're gonna start out with the oil system. So, it's hard to see here, but we have a Chase Bays sandwich plate in the factory location where the IS300 would have had this huge adapter block with an oil pressure sensor in it. We've gotten rid of all that. We're using a stock Toyota IS300 oil filter. We've got this Chase Bays plate allows several things. So first of all, at the very top, you can see my 4AN turbo feed coming out, and that proceeds along the engine cross member and goes up to the turbo. Now, we have to get rubber isolator clamps and properly mount these lines right now. They're just zip tied in place, but that's to come in the future. And then on the other side, we've got our oil pressure sensor for the gauge inside the car. So basically a return and our pressure and a return side on the oil, and an oil pressure gauge, and then an oil pressure feed line for the turbo. Now these motors, any turbo engine, you've got to cool the oil. You got to have some kind of oil cooler set up. A lot of modern turbo cars use like an oil to water separator type thing where engine coolant flows through the block beneath the oil filter. Some cars use oil coolers, but either way, you got to have something to cool the oil. We've gotten rid of the low level light, the engine oil low level light sensor that used to be right here. We've got a drift motion block off plate there. So that's this side of the oil system. Oil flows out of the block, goes to an engine oil cooler and comes back. I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Okay, so you can see the oil lines come up the frame, which obviously need rubber isolation and clamps. We'll get that. Comes out next to the radiator and into a Setrab USA oil cooler. Didn't have room for the fan on the front, so we just flipped it to the back. It's a puller fan that'll work just fine. We've got plenty of space between the oil cooler and the radiator. Really the only thing left to do with the engine oil system is I need to fabricate some mounts to tie the top of the oil cooler into the core support, and I've got to get those rubber isolation clamps that I told you guys about to properly secure all the lines to the frame and the car. And you can see that our feed line comes up and right into the top of the turbo. The only other aspect of the engine oil system is a drain line, a 10AN drain line that comes out of the turbo into the upper oil pan of the IS300 bottom end. This is a forward sump pan, which all the IS300s come from with. It actually worked perfectly for this car. I mean, look at that. It looks like it was designed to be here. I mean, the shape of the pan almost perfectly matches the engine crossmember. So this upper oil pan comes cast for turbo applications. It has the block off spot here. You just got to drill it out to be able to put a feed there. You can weld it on, or you can run studs and bolt it on. That's what I chose to do. If I have problems with this leaking in the future, I'll just weld a fitting to it. But that in a nutshell is the oil system. Now when we come inside the car, I kind of wanted this car to have it was a hot rod built in the 90s kind of feel to it. So I wanted the individual gauges, if you will, instead of going with a modern digital dash. So what we've done here to round out the oil system is this gauge right here is a oil pressure gauge for the engine, and it's also a transmission oil temperature gauge, so a 2-in-1 digital gauge. And then this gauge right here is going to be our 3-in-1 boost, EGT, and engine temperature. The only thing we're going to do after that, I'm going to mount a tack over there behind the steering wheel, and then we need to put a wideband gauge over here with these three. So we'll have three gauges here, a wideband and a tack over there, and then I'll have to figure out speedometer. But I wanted to kind of keep that 90s style. You know, this is an 88, 2J was a 90s motor. I want this to kind of be like a period correct hot rod. So that's why I just like old school gauges. These are glow shift gauges here, probably gonna run an AEM wideband, and we'll get back to that later. But that is the engine oil system. And so for all intents and purposes, it's complete. I can put oil in the motor. I just need to tidy up a few things. Okay, now let's move on to the transmission. So there's the transmission. It's that A340 I told you guys about, and you can actually, Toyota transmissions, if you will, come with identiplates right on them. So you can see this one here. It's an A3040 LE, and that's a Japanese transmission. It was imported. So we already have the shift kit in it. I went through the valve body and I put a new pan on it. Now this transmission is an unknown status. I have no idea if it's going to work. The good news is I only paid 250 bucks for it, and the cores for these are 500. So if the trans doesn't work, I've already got everything set up to run this trans. It's as simple as having a trans built, swapping it out with this one. That'd be a one-day job. So I'm not too worried about it, but I'm fingers crossed that it's got enough clutch left in it that it'll work. I will tell you that the valve body was seized up from water contamination, so I don't know. You guys will know when I know. Now, what I have done is, this transmission luckily came with the stock Toyota fittings, which are weird. I've converted them to AN6, and I'm running the same style lines that you see in the engine oil system. Pressure comes out the front, return comes to the back. Now, shifter wise, we have mounted the shifter, we've adjusted it. The shifter's in its home, currently working with my neighbor Jason, that you guys might remember from the 65 F100 project, to make the center console nice. I went ahead and picked up this W124 option center console at it, and then I'll die, and it's all going to tie together pretty nicely. We'll get to that more in a minute. All right, so to finish out the transmission, you can see that my pressure line comes in here, and then my return line comes out here on the brand new Summit radiator. I went ahead and did my transmission coolant temperature sensor is right here on the return. I figure that's the coolest the oil is ever gonna be. So if it's hot here, it's real hot. Now, that's the transmission system we need to do, or transmission fluid. This is original ATF0T4 Aisin from Toyota. I've only got 6 quarts though. I'm gonna need at least 4 to 5 more. So we're ready to put oil in the transmission. The only difference is we have to, just like the engine side, I gotta properly mount these lines to the car so they're not moving around. But it's engine oil system, we could put oil in the engine. That's to put transmission fluid in the transmission. Those two systems are essentially online. Again, just little nitnoid stuff. Moving on to cooling. So I went ahead and I drew up these brackets in QCAD. I welded them up. They're 304 stainless. I welded the same. They look just like this on the bottom, except I actually welded them to my intercooler mount. The cool thing is the intercooler mounts come apart, and so will that. So everything here is removable. I've got some more on the way because I didn't have enough. I've got to tie in. I'm going to end up making a mount here to tie into the core support right here. So the top side of the radiator will be mounted, and then I'm going to make a little decorative piece to kind of make it look nicer. Same on this side. Also, the tough part here is the water outlet. I'm going to have to make a piece of aluminum. I might even have to modify that, but this is going to be tricky. I might do AN fittings here to make it easier. I've got to figure this out. Now the return side, the factory IS300 hose may actually work out pretty well here. I might just have to get a reducer, but this goes back in there underneath the turbo, you see, like that, and then it'll connect at the bottom. I think the bottom hose is actually pretty good. I'll just need to put a reducer on this side to go up to the radiator size. So coolant wise, pretty good. I've got some more stuff to work out, some more little puzzles. I want to keep the heater, the Mercedes heater, and that uses 2 valves. That uses a adjustable temperature valve right there and an on-off valve up here, and comes into this hose. I'm going to end up having to connect to here, and I'm going to have to kind of shorten this pipe so I can get it away from the down pipe of the wastegate. And then the return side of the coolant on the heater core, I'm going to put right here on the top of the block. So that'll take care of cooling. It's really just hoses at this point, fabricating finishing the upper mounts. I deleted the cooling in the intake and the throttle body. Not necessary, not going to run it. So cooling system is almost there. We're like 50%. I did put a spout fan on the front of it. No aftermarket shroud is going to work here. So for now, I put a seal between the fan and the radiator. The fan's almost as big as the radiator, so I really don't need a shroud. It'll do the job, but you can see what kind of clearance I'm working with here. I've got like less than a ½ an inch probably. I'm probably going to pull it back, but it's tight. So if I do put a shroud on this, it's going to be real shallow, and I'm going to have to make it myself. I'm going to run it like that for now and see how we do, but that's cooling system. What else have we done? Okay, I told you guys about gauges. I've got most of the gauges and the sensors run. This is going to be boost. That's going to tie into the intercooler pipe right before it gets here. We got transmission temperature coming out the bottom side of the return on the return line there. And as far as coolant, I'll show you that. Okay, so if you look way up there, you'll see a green cannon plug. That is the actual coolant temperature sensor for the ECU that the ECU needs to see. And if you look over to the right, you'll see a little stainless bung sticking out of the head there. That right there, that is on the IS300. There's 2 coolant spots, the front and the rear. I'm using a couple adapter fittings. I'm going to put the engine coolant temp sensor right there. Okay, as far as the engine exhaust temperature, I'm going to weld a bung here right behind the turbo. Now there's 2 schools of thought on this. You could tap it right in the manifold, which is where most diesels, most people want it right there in the manifold. It's just data, and you just got to be able to interpret the data. Now generally back here you're going to be a couple 100 degrees cooler than right here, but you can learn your motor temperatures just by learning how she runs, and you'll know if it's hot or if it's not hot. So I'd rather drill, tap, weld into this downpipe than I would into that nice treadstone manifold. So I'm going to run my AGT sensor here. Again, some of you are going to be like, no, that's not a good place to put it. Well, that's where I want to put it. Now, that takes care of the gauges with the exception of the wideband. I'm going to weld another oxygen sensor bung there. So I'm going to take this downpipe out. I'll add 2 sensors to it. Now, that's pretty much where the gauges are at. The engine harness is installed. I did add a bunch of ground wires and a ground point, and right now it's attached here. I'm gonna end up putting a battery stud over here, and I don't think the Mercedes doesn't have adequate grounding. It just doesn't. It's got this dinky little cable right here that's grounding the battery. It uses a whole bunch of these small gauge ground wires. So what I'm gonna do is kind of like what I did on the DeLorean. I'm gonna make a whole bunch of 4 gauge ground straps, and I'm gonna tie it all together. It'll have a battery stud over here. Now, other than that, the positive side is pretty much factory Mercedes to the starter, except I did replace the battery cable. It's got a brand new positive battery cable. And like I said, when I'm done, the battery will be grounded to the body. The motor will be grounded to the motor mounts. The alternator will be grounded. There's a 5 ground harness over there that's taking care of that side of the motor. And then it'll all tie in directly to the negative battery post via a stud over here. So I did that on the DeLorean, and that car, I mean, the headlights are brighter, it starts quick. I mean, good grounds will change a car, believe me. So that'll be the battery cable system. We're waiting on parts for that, or I haven't even ordered them yet, to be honest with you. So other than the negative battery cable side of things, the motor harness is done. I've roughly routed sensor cables and stuff because I'm waiting until I get them all installed to then make that pretty. Same thing with this right here is our power distribution block, and these are our harness leads, the engine harness leads that I got to tie into various systems on the car. So this right here is going to be everything. The motor is going to be completely standalone from the body, and I've maintained the Mercedes harness to the point where the body stuff will work fine. But if we ever have a problem with this engine, just like I did on the EcoBoost DeLorean, we're going to find it right here, or the ECU, or a switch. So that's pretty much everything we've done under the hood for the MAF. So the IS300 motor factory is a Karman Vortex system. We're converting to that GT VVTi motor, which used a regular mass airflow sensor. I got rid of a bunch of stuff over here that's going to give me some room. What we're going to do is flip that intake filter over this way with the MAF. And we're going to tie into recirc the blow-off valve area behind the MAF into the turbo. That's as far as we've got on that system. We do have a MAF sensor. It is connected to the harness. Next thing we got to do is intercooler system. We've got the intercooler mounted. The only thing I have to do, I've got a couple of tabs here, but I've got to weld these up to tie up the top of the intercooler. We've already rubber isolated the bottom. The intercooler will be hard mounted, and what we're going to do is we're going to come out over here 90 up through that, and that'll be to the feed on the turbo. We can rotate the turbo, and then same thing on this side. It's going to come out 90 up through here and then connect into the throttle body. So most of the intercooler piping will be hidden. We're going to have to put our blow-off valve here. I've got a BSI, like a giant wastegate back here, because I don't want to deal with wastegate creep or any of that stuff. And this is a mechanical piston style wastegate, so we don't have to worry about rubber diaphragms. I do have the blow-off valve. We got same thing here. I didn't want to have too small of a blow-off valve, and I want improvement room in the future. I think this is a 55, but it's a tile. It's nice. So my plan here, we'll have to figure out how to mount it where we have space, probably on this side. I'll mount the blow-off valve, and then we'll recirc all the way back over here to behind the MAF. So we've got all the hard parts we need. I got fabrication work to do. I've got to finish fabricating the upper radiator, the top side of the oil cooler, and the top side of the intercooler. And we got to get all our rubber hoses figured out for the cooling system. Once that's done, and I tie in the electrical wiring, we're ready to start. So we're really not that far off. Now let me take you into the car because a lot's happened in here too. So first thing you'll see is a couple of switches that I've tied into the Mercedes dash. Now this is Rad Design Products is where I got the shifter and all this stuff from. And not Rad Industries Super Guy. This is Rad Design Products out of Washington. They do off-road shifters and stuff for Toyotas. Check them out. But what we've done here is auto manual. So if I want the ECU to control the trans, flip the switch up. If I want to shift it manually, flip the switch down. If I want the ECU to control everything to include torque lockup, torque converter lockup, same thing. So it'll be auto, auto. If I want to go manual, I go manual here, torque lockup here, okay? Now over here on the shifter, there's an electrical switch tied into my shifter that ties into the gear indicator sensor from Toyota on that side. So when this is down in first, it sends an electrical signal to the 3 solenoids that are in the transmission, and it'll manually put the car into first gear. So we go like this. First gear, second gear, third gear. If I want to go fourth, because it's a solenoid activation, push this button, puts me up to fourth gear. I want to go back to third right here. Now if I'm in third or fourth and I'm above 45 miles an hour, push this button, it'll lock out my torque converter. If I want to unlock it, I push it there. So I'm cruising on the highway, boom. Now, that's pretty much that. As far as mounting the shifter into the Mercedes, the passenger side holes lined up perfectly with the original mounts. The driver's side, I had to do riv nuts, and I used, I think this is M6 hardware. I did 1-inch stainless spacers to bring it up, and I did have to modify the center console. Now what we did is I'm going to get rid of the audio control switch here and the mirror adjustment switch that was in the middle. I'm going to retain the window switches and the original wood piece that was here. And we're also, I've got this 124 center console that I picked up that I'll dye to match. But when you adjust the cable here, this was that Toyota sensor that I was talking about. This little guy right here is what tells the Toyota ECU what gear the transmission's in. So because this is an electronic transmission, we physically, when we shift to first gear here, we're physically moving that arm. You see it? So that's first gear. And this arm, which you can't see if you had the oil pan off and you're looking inside the transmission, this arm right here directly controls a lever that moves a giant plunger back and forth. Now, the distance that plunger moves allows fluid to go into orifices that go into the valve body. So first gear, fluid goes to a certain point, second gear, it goes to a new point, third gear, it goes to a new point. So on the outside, we're telling the ECU what gear we're in. On the inside, we're actually adjusting where the fluid is going in the transmission. So that's the mechanical side, but the electric side ties into this sensor and these wires up here. I had, as far as the harness on the bottom of the transmission, I had to get I picked up a wrecked Supra harness to get the plugs that I needed. There's 3 different versions of the valve body plug on this transmission. There's a 12 wire, I think, a 4 wire, and an 8 wire. Back me up out there, I'm not sure. But this one has an 8 wire. And the wiring diagrams are pretty well open source, so that's going to be that. Now, for the electrical side of the house on the transmission and the motor, I went ahead and made an ECU plate. I drew it up in CAD, sent it to Send Cut Send. ECU is wired and it is velcroed to this plate, so I can swap it out if I need to. And the bottom of the plate is drilled for heat sink, so there'll be plenty of air to get to the ECU to keep it cool. Other than that, we have an ECU main relay, a fuel pump relay, ignition exciter, and then a noise filter for the ignition and the ECU. I don't know how I'm going to mount these in here yet. I might just Velcro them to the top of the ECU, or I might mount them along the upper portion here, flip them upside down and actually physically mount them in the glove box so that they're not laying on the ECU. So the motor and the ECU are plugged in. I literally just got to wire in a couple of leads, like 4 wires, and this thing will fire. there's the gauges I showed you guys about earlier, and we can expect the wideband on this side and the tack above the steering wheel. Now, as far as the center console, we're retaining everything factory Mercedes here, except for somebody had already cut this out to put an aftermarket stereo in. So I'll put a stereo in, but I'll eliminate this garbage. One cool thing here. Here you can see the wood for the Mercedes factory ashtray and the little ashtray trim cover. I'm going to eliminate the ashtray, and I'm going to make a little mount plate here to basically replace the ashtray with this Joe's Racing switch panel. Now, Joe's Racing is pretty cool. This is dirt track stuff, so these switches are sealed. Not that they're going to be getting wet in the car, but this is a really nice finished product. Basically relies on power to come into this switch, and then it shares that power to all these switches. So it's not a high amp circuit device, but basically what you use this for is to control the signal for the switch side of a relay. So it doesn't need a lot of power. Okay, so we're in the car now, and what we're going to do is, my plan here is to essentially, you can see the the ashtray sits in that spot right there. And what we're going to end up doing, let me move this. This is all just loose in here right now because I'm obviously still fabricating stuff. But what we're going to end up doing is, this actually sits in there pretty nicely. I need to make an adapter piece behind it to kind of fill these gaps and to actually let it mount to something. So I'm going to do that. But my plan here is ignition, fuel pumps, ECU main, manual fan control. The key is still going to control the body side harness, and it will still control the starter. Just the ignition signal is going to come from here, kind of like a race car. So I'll mess with the order and the sequence I want there. But when this is all together, we're still going to have all the factory wood. We're going to have a radio in here. And the only thing that'll be out of place will be this switch panel, which I think, you know, so is the shifter. You know what I mean? I'm doing my best here to kind of tie things together. The good thing is that when the wood piece is in here, only about that much of the shifter is exposed. And my buddy Jason's a great woodworker. He's helping me out on that. And this, you know, the whole interior's Palomino Mercedes color, which people make fun of and call Pinkamino because it turns pink when it gets old in the sun. So I went ahead and picked up this 124 center console because when I'd hit bumps, stuff would fly out of here. So this would just be a place for me to put my wallet, my cell phone, or whatever. And I bought SEM paint. They make great stuff. They make an interior dye that matches that Mercedes Palomino color. So I'll dye this. I also have a new map case, door pocket coming to replace the one that was damaged here. Same thing. It's actually brand new NOS. It's just not the right color. I think it's this color. But I'm going to paint that. So interior wise, this car is really, it just needs a lot of little cleanup stuff, but it's all there. The worst of it is really this piece right here. The wind just kind of tore down. But I mean, look at the quality of these cars. This is metal. That's a piece of aluminum. So other than that, the interior is all there. Still got the first aid kit in the back and everything. Sunroof. I love this car. So the only problem I found in the interior that I got to fix is we got a bad window switch here. So the rest of these window switches are still working. I got to order a new switch for this spot. All the window motors still work. Turn signals, everything like that still works. We're going to have a whole bunch of dummy lights lit up because the car is going to be super confused as to what's happening when I start it, because it's not seeing its own ECU anymore. It's not seeing any of its own sensors anymore. And it's just going to be like Frankenstein waking up on the table after the lightning bolts hit him. She's going to have no clue what's going on. But the good thing is again, all I need the Mercedes to do is turn the lights on, do the mirrors, do the sunroof, which I've already checked all that stuff, and it all works. We're still going to have heat. We're not going to have air conditioning. And most importantly, we have a chicken installed, and we have our Panzer tank installed, because I call this car the Panzer. But, and you can see old school racing style, I've got these gauges facing me here. It's very exciting. This project has come, this is about what, a 1.5 year project, and in the last month we've really gotten a lot done on this car. So I'm going as fast as I can. Parts are expensive, but I really think that we are real close. I'm hoping within a month to fire this motor, and I'm gonna try to do that. I'm really gonna try to do that. So my goal is to be driving this car this year. By the end of this year, car's on the road, driving it. So anyhow, that should get you guys all caught up to speed. I know I usually record doing all this stuff as I'm doing it, but I was really trying to get stuff done quickly in the last few weeks. I've been really, it doesn't seem like I've done a lot, but believe me, there's so many little things I've done. We've done a lot. So now that you're up to speed, I'm gonna bring you along while I finish the rest of the stuff. Anyways, I appreciate you stopping by. Again, please subscribe, please like, please comment, please share with your friends, hit the little alert bell, all that standard stuff. Seems annoying to you guys, really helps small channel like me grow, helps us exist. The sponsors that I do have for this channel are because of you guys. Without your attention, without you watching, commenting, and all that kind of stuff, it would just be me, and I can't build all these cars without help. So thank you. We'll see you next time.